Have you ever watched something that completely rewired your brain chemistry?
A procedural network drama might not be your usual pick, but it's ours.
This is The Buddie System, a 911 deep dive podcast hosted by three friends who have DM'd each other enough character dissertations to earn a PhD in media literacy.
I'm Han, coming to you straight from the characters' heads.
I'm Sil, bringing you to the observation deck.
And I'm Rachel, connecting the dots with my red string.
With our powers combined,
No stone is left unturned.
And no buddy is left behind.
thanks for tuning into the Buddie System podcast. This week's episode covers some serious topics seen in the show, including attempted suicide and sexual misconduct. Please take care of yourself and your mental health. If you'd like to avoid this content, please see the show notes for safe timestamps. Welcome to Dispatch. What's on call this week?
Today's episode is called Let Go. It was written by Ryan Murphy, Brad Falchuk, and Tim Minear, directed by Gwyneth Horder-Payton, and originally aired Wednesday, January 10, 2018.
The emergencies of the week were a roller coaster malfunction at the state fair, turning an outing for two friends into a nightmare. A man hides on a kitchen island from some attack Dobermans. A window washer's support cable breaks, leaving him hanging outside a skyscraper. And a man is threatening to jump off the balcony of his high-rise, thinking his wife cheated on him.
So the episode starts off fast on a roller coaster with some friends who, well, one of the friends is not really jazzed to be there and doesn't really want to go on the roller coaster, and the other is egging him on. And long story short, it does not work out well for them. One of them is flung onto the ground, and the other one is literally hanging. His life is hanging in the balance, and that is where we start the episode, where Buck shows up and is trying to save him.
And just to add, Buck is in good spirits. And
He's so excited.
Yeah.
Because Bobby asks, are you all right doing something that's, hella risky? And Buck is so excited, hell yeah, this Daredevil hero stuff is what I signed up for. He's so excited to be there.
And he's also in good standing with Bobby as well.
Right.
Because we kind of saw in the pilot episode, there was a little bit of tension there where Buck didn't really want to take some direction from the captain. But it looks like they've kind of found a groove and they're working really well together and everything is going smoothly until
it doesn't.
Until this call
right here, officer.
This call right here, officer. Oh my God. So Buck is, doing stuff that makes me nervous, which is what he does for a living. He's just walking up the roller coaster supports without being strapped onto anything because the fire truck is came in at a bad angle. They're coming trying to pull forward and come back so they can put the ladder up at a good angle to get everyone down.
Talk about Daredevil hero stuff.
Yeah, talk about actual Daredevil hero stuff. He's just climbing up the supports for a roller coaster.
I'm surprised they didn't put the I guess the airbag thing underneath him at first.
The big mattress that they blow up?
I think those only work for a certain distance. I think you can only be I don't actually know for sure, but I think it's only a couple stories that you can fall down and survive still on that. Probably not from the roller coaster height that they were at. But anyway, so Buck's in good spirits. He gets up there and then he turns on his encouraging everything's gonna be cool. We're gonna get everyone off here safe. He's very confident in what he's doing, and he's talking to Devin, who's the one who's hanging. Kudos to his upper body strength, because I would have long ago been gone.
Yeah, I would have been with Chad down there.
Oh my God.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Yeah, his friend Chad unfortunately was flung out of when it malfunctioned, and he is on the ground. Which Devin asks about. He's like, Chad's dead, and Buck is like, hey, he's asking about his friend, radio's down, and Bobby's like, hey, Chimney, how's that kid? And then the kid's dead. And so they choose to obviously not tell him because they're trying to not have this man panic who's holding on.
Devin, exactly.
And save the other people.
And Buck has to Buck is reassuring Devin that he's getting the help that he needs.
Yep. But Devin is he is panicking because his friend kind of goaded him on by saying if we don't get on, there's these girls here who are videoing and they'll put video of us online calling us pussies. Like, do you want to, would you rather just get the roller coaster over with, or would you rather be paid, like, known as this, like, and posted all over, be everywhere on the internet? And so he's having like a panic attack about this because he's like, oh, well, now they're recording this of him like holding on.
As there is a crowd growing down at the ground, seeing the malfunction of the roller coaster.
Yeah.
They've even got like a news crew out there. And
yeah. And Buck's like very much like, hey, like, don't worry about them. Just look at me. Like, you can do this. I got you. And he's trying to be really encouraging. And like, Buck is finally like, he's strapped in, and he's got, what is it? It's like a loop or something that Devin just needs to reach up and put his arm in. And it's only a couple inches. Devin won't reach up, and he keeps trying to encourage him. Like, I need you to trust me. Like, I won't let you go. Like, please just do this. And Devin says he can't and just lets go.
And that leaves Buck still climbed up on the roller coaster, trying to do his job, which we know he does very well. Mm-hmm, and we can see why. Like, he is very encouraging and trying to, say all of the right things to help this rescue go successfully. You just see him like, it looks like he's probably processing this in slow motion, essentially, because we don't, of course, like it's television, so we don't actually like see the fall, and we see it from Buck's like
point,
or we see coverage of Buck, so we see his reaction to it, and he just looks so unbelievably like, what just happened? How did this go wrong? Like, it was fine, and then it wasn't, and just kind of like that immediate heartbreak that you see on his face.
He's just like devastated because like, it's not just that he's doing the job because he's good at it and that, he's good at doing the job and good with people. It's because he genuinely likes helping people, and he really deeply cares about helping them. So this is his first loss on the job because he's only been there 6 months.
I think he said less than 6 months.
Less than 6 months?
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty good track record so far, but everyone has to experience that.
Yeah, it was bound to happen.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of brings it into after the call when Buck is kind of like just reeling, trying to figure out how to process this, because how can you not feel like it's your fault, even though he did everything correctly? He did everything like to the letter what his job was supposed to do. So at the station afterwards, you just kind of see him a little forlorn and trying to, I guess, confide, or Bobby and Chimney at first, who are trying to, like help, not exactly cheer his spirits up. Chimney kind of like makes it into a joke.
Makes it into a joke.
Yeah. Not the loss, but like.
No, but he's trying to in his very Chimney way be like, you can't get emotionally invested in these people. Like, yes, it's your job to help them, but like, you can't. He's basically saying in his joking way that like, you need to look at each thing as its own thing while it's happening, and as soon as it's over, whether it's win or lose, like it's it's done.
Very much like live in the present sort of moment. Don't think about it too much, what will happen in the future, and don't focus too much on the past, which is he says it kind of frames it in a very like blasé kind of way, but that seems to be very much in line with Chimney's personality from what we know of it so far, which is to kind of like make light of things. I think he correlates it to, don't think of it as like a long-term relationship. Think of it as like a one-night stand, which it sounds a little crass. But if Chimney, who is, as far as we know, like a very kind of lighthearted, mostly happy-go-lucky kind of guy, like that makes sense for how he would process things, because he doesn't want like that heaviness. In contrast, when Buck asks Bobby, who's over in the kitchen, do you ever like forget it? Or I forget exactly what question he asks here. Do you ever really get over it? And Bobby's just like, no. Just like, straight up, no.
It's like you don't.
He's not sugarcoating it. He's not like giving Buck any like placating kind of like speech about it. And I think that is also kind of like Chimney, that is also very telling for how Bobby processes these kinds of losses and kinds of traumas. And it may not be the best way. Like, it's kind of,
No.
it may be practical in the fact that, like, no, you don't really get over it.
Yeah.
But also, like, is that the healthiest way? I'm not sure. Time will tell as we get into, more of Bobby, which, of course, we'll see later. But
I think for Buck, it's really just that, I think he's blaming himself that he couldn't talk Devin into just reaching up, because he just keeps saying, like, all he had to do is reach up. Like, I don't understand why he wouldn't do it. He's just really, he says something like, I just see him every time I close my eyes, I see him, which gave me Far From Home flashbacks.
Every time I see his
everywhere I go, I see his face.
Which is also kind of like, I mean, that's just to bring a whole other fandom into it. I mean, that is,
but that's trauma. If something is haunting you to that level, it is haunting you. It is traumatized you. So Athena shows up to like the little Fire Fam dinner, and we have this nice little moment where like she says she isn't sold on him, but she thinks that like saving her from getting shot warrants a second chance. And she's looking at him like with a warm smile, which we did not see at all on the first episode.
That's a nice
she
180.
She reaches out her hand and shakes it with him, and Buck, like, who has been like despondent pretty much this whole time, like gives like a tiny little smile. So like you could tell how much that meant to him, that little moment like kind of broke through his guilt.
So Bobby is telling Athena like what is Buck going through, losing Devin at the scene, and Athena actually gives him some advice, or like kind of consoles him in a way. And she says, and she talks about the uniform and how it's for their own good, but when they finally get to take off the uniform, it finally symbolizes letting go of the sad, crazy, inhumane things that they've seen during the day, and it'll pass. Even though, like, she says that, and I'm sure he appreciates it, like, he was not going to let this go.
No, I mean, it's not in his nature. We already see just in these, 2 episodes, we already see that letting go is not really in his nature.
Nope.
And you can see that Athena kind of gives Bobby a concerned look, and he gives, like, they're both kind of looking like from Buck back to each other, like concernedly.
Yeah,
they're like, he's new on the job, and it's concerning how hard he's taking this. And I think this is probably a make or break thing for this job, is like, if you can handle, like, if you can figure out how to cope with it and move forward, because if you can't be effective at what you do.
Which is also what makes Athena's comment about seeing the uniform as a physical manifestation and taking the metaphor of letting go and attributing it to getting in or out of uniform. Again, just like with Bobby and Chimney, that's probably what works for her. It seems to, I mean, I don't know how much we can say like it's a fairly healthy way, but I guess it kind of like, your mileage may vary sort of thing, but like that kind of like, I imagine so many people who are in those kinds of jobs, or like nursing, doctors, like if you take off the scrubs, you no longer have to be in that mode sort of thing. And it just kind of helps differentiate your mindset.
Yeah.
But it's really hard seeing Buck, who we got such a clear like picture of in the first episode, the pilot episode, of like who he is. And he's this very like kind of lighthearted, kind of cocksure, but like cares very deeply. And it's kind of hard to see in just like the second outing of this show, just like how brought down he is by such what I'm assuming is a fairly, unfortunately, standard thing to like see or endure on the job sort of thing.
When you're responding to emergencies, it's an emergent situation, and it's unpredictable, and there's no way that like the odds of that are not any more than 50-50, if not worse. So,
and what's kind of making it worse then is after the call at the roller coaster, we mentioned there were like large crowds being gathered. It also was getting coverage on the news. So there were a couple reporters who were talking to Buck and kind of lauding him as this hero, because we do have to remember there were, I think, like 4 other people in that roller coaster. He saved all of them, but all he's focusing on, and I guess this is how we're kind of getting his storyline from his point of view, because that's barely even a mention anymore. And it's just the one that he lost, which is not a good thing to focus on. So like technically he is a hero. He saved 4 other people, but it was the one that is hitting him so hard, makes it seem like he's feeling himself like a fraud, just being very self-critical.
But you can just see in these interviews that he does not have any of his usual personality or confidence, that he seems very lost. He seems very lost and unsure, and just like he doesn't even want to be doing the interview. Like, you know, there's no confidence, there's no cockiness, there's no charm. There's no charm, there's nothing. It's just like all of the color has been sucked out of him, and and I think he brings up the person that he couldn't save, like even when they're not talking about it, because he just feels this weight of guilt on his conscience.
It's a weird clip to air, like, you know, because you hear the news anchor, he's like, yeah, this is hero Evan Buckley, and then he's like, yeah, I don't know what happened. He just didn't grab my hand, or he just let go. I don't know what happened. He keeps like saying that. So it's very like,
because he's stuck in that loop in his head.
He's stuck in a loop, and the roller coaster was on a loop.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
Which the roller coaster got stuck in a loop. See what we did there?
Hey.
Connecting the strings. We did it.
And it's also like, just as an aside, like I kind of wonder who allowed him, or like why someone didn't prevent him from talking to the news reporter, because we don't see that scene. So I don't know if it was like the reporters coming up to Buck specifically, or
it's in the daytime, so it's not at the scene, unless like they were there until dawn.
The scene.
Yeah, there was
one at the scene.
Oh, okay.
The one, and that's the one. Abby.
That's the one where he was saying like, I don't know what happened. Like it was on the scene, so it's also kind of you know, I wouldn't think that the fire department or anything would have been okay. Like it's basically like a public statement sort of thing. And I don't know if people like were probably okaying it because he just saved 4 people. And that's probably what
because it's good publicity for the fire department, you know, and they're like, yes, donate money to us, please.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like, donate money because you see the hot, sad firefighter who saved people. Look at the sad puppy.
It was so kind of disheartening too to see that he almost had to like endure that interview. At the scene, like right after it just happened. But then they come back again, and that's probably more of like the department's like PR sort of thing. And then they say like the really kind of, you know, it's inappropriate in the moment, because like the reporter is not kind of sensing the tone that he's in. She's just kind of like barreling through, but like she also has a job to do, and the whole bringing up Twitter, asking if he's single, and it's like, that is not like, if you are paying attention to anything, it's so like not
it's
the
such
right
like bad journalism too.
Yeah.
Like I mean, get like if they're trying to do it like as a puff piece and like it's gonna get but it's, I don't know, it's just bad journalism, man.
I did also, again, as an aside, I thought it was kind of interesting that they had Buck and news reporting like already in the second episode, because we'll see this down the line as well, like in season 2, his relationship with news reporting or reporters and everything like that. So I just thought that was like an interesting link so early on. That's neither here nor there. I just thought that was kind of, I just thought that was kind of
you're
interesting.
Right. I did think about that too, briefly. So, anyway, since Buck isn't in such a great mental state and, you know, completely in control of his mental faculties, he makes a great decision and goes to Devon's funeral.
I feel like that is something that, in general, anyone in this kind of field, like, should not be doing.
Should not do.
In the last episode, it was touched on briefly when I think it was the baby in the pipe, when they were delivering her to the hospital, and Buck wanted to keep on going and make sure that she was okay. And Bobby just kind of like really held him back, which is also kind of a thread that we'll see throughout the first season about how like you don't go past the glass doors after you've done your job, you're done, which is also another kind of like way of letting go, like that physical manifestation, as opposed to the uniform. It's like, this is the physical boundary you don't really go past. So much in the same vein. But Buck being Buck, he goes to the funeral like racked with guilt.
Right. And he goes in and tries to give his condolences to Devin's sister, Liz. And that obviously doesn't go very well either because, Buck's emotions are like running high. And then at some point he says, higher than the roller coaster.
Oh, no. Wow.
Anyway, so they're running higher. And, because she's asking him what happened. And he ends up saying that Devin just gave up. Which obviously was the wrong thing to say. And then she goes ahead and says, well, you failed. And she says, you failed.
Yeah. So she yells at him. Mm-hmm. She says, my brother, loved his life and he wanted to live, and says that, Buck failed him. And he just looks absolutely devastated and like the most kicked puppy I've ever seen him.
Oh, yeah.
It's awful.
I would love to think a little more about what he thought he was going to get out of going to the funeral, because I know it must be out of guilt, right? Of course, that's like one of the primary emotions I think he's feeling. But also, is it more of it kind of seems like it was, I don't want to say selfish, but in essence, like a little selfishly motivated, that he was looking for some closure there, as opposed to going to provide condolence for Devin's family. And because like when Liz, Devin's sister, goes up to him, Buck says like, he doesn't really say anything that is, I mean, granted, I'll give him this. He doesn't really say anything that's placating, kind of like he's in a better place, blah, 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 blah. He does like tell like the factual truth, but I don't know or if he even like considered that is not what she needed to hear,
Well, I don't think so. I don't think he's in a place where he can even think about that.
No.
I think he honestly, like my opinion on my read on this character is that he went there looking to be punished. Like he wanted to get yelled at for failing.
Like
that's how deep.
Like he was seeking out that like, because everyone's calling him a hero, and he knew the people that would not call him that and see him as he truly
like,
was.
I know the people who will know exactly, what I am and what I did or what I wasn't able to do. I also think that there is this piece of him that's like, I just don't get it, because he really did only have to reach up a couple inches. Like Buck had his hand out, and Buck's like, I don't understand, because I would have reached out, like, and he doesn't get it. So I think there's a part of him too that's also just trying to understand, and maybe thinks that by showing up there, he's just spinning because he doesn't have any tools to deal with this. It's not just that it's like a first time experience for him. It's that how do you deal with something like that?
Exactly. Just like on a very human level, not even just like when it's your job.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not great choices, but I really do think that it was because otherwise, like, why?
Yeah.
That little bit of the curiosity that's like, or not even the curiosity, the like wanting the answer, like trying to find some sort of understanding of like why he would do that would not have overruled, been the motivating thing. I really think it was the wanting to be made to feel bad, to be yelled at.
Right.
And he got his wish.
And he does not feel better for it. And you see...
No, of course he doesn't. He feels worse. The next time we see Buck, he is on a call, and Bobby tells him to go up the ladder, of the fire truck to help this window washer whose supports fell. While Bobby says he's going to go inside and go up to the roof. And Buck asks to switch, and Bobby kind of gives him a look, but he lets him. And then we don't see how that call goes. We just see the aftermath, which is Buck again looking like downtrodden and
Mhm.
just so disappointed and devastated. Elbows on his knees, like head hung low.
Yeah, they kind of give us a bit of a red herring here. It's like, oh no, they lost another call sort of thing.
Mhm.
But as we get further into the scene, we see, or Buck also says to Bobby, who comes in too, he's like, I know I let you down. So we're like, oh my gosh, he's having a really bad week. He's lost 2
Mhm.
calls in 1 week.
That's interesting. I didn't interpret it that way when I first watched it, because
Mhm.
because Bobby was gonna handle it. And like I guess as an audience member, like I assumed that it was more or less Buck is, feeling real bad because he kind of like did not follow the order that Bobby wanted him to do. He didn't, go rescue the window washer. He was like, let me get on the roof, and then Bobby's like basically, yeah, okay. But in the back of his mind, he's also like, we're going to talk about this later.
Yeah, he gentle
So,
parents him again. He's like, yeah, you don't have to do the hard thing today. Like, I'll go a little easy on you. But yeah, and that's what Buck is referring to when he says, I know I let you down. But it's just like a funny, not like a funny haha, but like an interesting way to get into the scene because you really don't know what happened during
Yeah.
it. So, I let you down. And then we get this really lovely conversation between Buck and Bobby.
It's one of my favorite
Mhm.
moments of theirs literally ever.
Mhm.
But like it is one of my favorite insights into Buck as a character. So it's great that it's there this early on.
And you get a lot more kind of depth and a teeny bit of backstory about Buck.
Yeah.
And he just kind of like offers up this information about himself to Bobby about how
Unprompted.
unprompted.
Yeah.
It shows just like how much of a safe space Bobby is for him and how
Yeah.
much Buck looks up to him, even only being on the job for like less than 6 months. But Buck was saying that, when he moved to LA, he signed up to be a Navy SEAL, was in the training for it, and he couldn't cut it because they wanted machines and people who could like kind of turn off that switch in their mind to be able to follow orders and
Yeah.
just do what they're being told to do, which in the first episode we already see like Buck is not one of those people.
No.
And he says to Bobby like he didn't want to turn off every natural human instinctive emotion in his body. He couldn't and he doesn't want to, which
Yeah.
are 2 different things, but I think very important as well.
Yeah.
Because he basically doesn't want to let go of his humanity because of how deeply we're really able to see how much he cares. Like he wants to save people. He wants to care for people, which is, I think, one of his primary like motivations that is kind of like underneath his like devil may care swagger kind of surface that he projects himself to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, like when he starts the story, he says that, like he tried out to be a SEAL and really good at the badassery stuff, but he was bad at following orders. Duh. But that he was working on it, but that the problem was what Rachel just said. It's just really an interesting insight to see and a really great reflection on a character we get to meet next season, which we'll talk about then.
Oh yeah, it's a really great kind of just like little plant the seed, think about it, let it marinate. But it's also Buck also says in this conversation that this is why he loves being a firefighter and he loves this job because he gets to be the tough guy, which we know he kind of revels in generally, when he's not going through it. So he gets to be the tough guy, but he also gets to help people. And that is such like a core pillar of
it's a prime
this
directive.
character. Exactly. And it's like, it is the most pure intention like as anyone could ever have, really.
Yeah.
And then Bobby kind of responds to him. I forget exactly.
So Bobby talks about his first loss on the job and like describes like, exactly what the girl was wearing and, all these details about her. So we get to learn that Bobby had a similar experience, that he had a very hard time forgetting and that he never will. But that obviously he's found some way to move forward with it. And then he says, quote, "I'm glad you can't flip that switch. I don't want you to. It's not going to make you a better firefighter. And anybody who tells you that losing someone doesn't affect them is lying." I think is like exactly what Buck needs to hear, because I think he feels like, because also not only that he failed, but because it's affecting him so hard that like there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's just this loop in his brain where it's like, I wasn't good enough to save him, and I'm not good enough because I can't get over this because it's affecting me so
like
badly.
I'm a bad firefighter.
Yeah, like I'm not good at my job. Yeah, exactly. So it was just a really beautiful talk, but at the end of it, Bobby does a great thing and says like, you got to go to therapy though, basically, and gives him a trauma counselor's number. He's saying you got to talk to someone. Like, it doesn't have to be him, but you've got to talk to someone. So we will talk about the therapy scene in our scene dissection segment a little later, because we just have a lot of stuff to get into with it. Yeah. So don't think we're skipping over it.
So we're skipping it for now, but
yes,
essentially Buck goes to see the therapist. Things happen. It doesn't exactly go as it should have, just to gloss over that. And then afterwards, so once that transpires, we see the 118 responding to another call. And this is a guy on the edge of his balcony getting into it with his wife or girlfriend about how she cheated on him and everything. And she's on this adjacent balcony, and they're just like going back and forth, like mid argument. And he's like, "I'm gonna do it." Like keeps threatening to jump, and she keeps reining him back in with some tough love, I guess is putting it nicely. So then we see again where Bobby, being the captain, he gives out the directives and the orders for everybody. And whereas last time with the window washer, Buck was like, "Yeah, I'm not cut out to do this right now. I'm gonna, be the anchor as opposed to the hero." And this time Bobby kind of pushes back on that, saying, "No, Buck's gonna handle this one."
Yeah. Buck still hems and haws, and like Chimney's even like I can go instead. But he's like, no, Buck's got this. And he's kind of like, and I like that they call it the maneuver. He's like, we have to do the maneuver.
Trademark copyright.
Yeah, which I wonder if it's something that they've practiced but never actually done before. But the way that Bobby talks about it later, it sounds like they've done it before. I don't know.
I feel like
it's just interesting.
I think there was an interview that Oliver Stark did fairly recently, and he was talking about like some of the stunts that he was and was not allowed to do. And I think he said that the maneuver is a real thing that firefighters do. And he was like geared up to do it, but then they said, "No, you
absolutely
can't do this." Again, may or may not be true, but it seemed like that was it was taken directly from, actual procedures and stuff. I don't know if they call it that exactly. But the maneuver trademark.
Yeah, but so Bobby gets up there with the wife and is trying to help by having her not say crazy things to her husband, and he's not really successful because she just, I don't know, I don't think she really likes this man that she is with, but she doesn't want him to die, so she's like trying, but not really. But we see him like trying to talk to the husband, then like he starts going like, "I know exactly how you feel," and he starts telling this like the story about how he was proposing to someone on the Eiffel Tower, and right when you get to like the crux of the story about like what her answer would have been, you see Buck like swoop in and just literally drop kick the man inside. And it was awesome.
No wonder they call it the maneuver.
The maneuver.
It's kind of badass.
It's very badass. And you could tell, like, just his whole demeanor changes immediately afterwards. Like, he stands up and he's like, the confidence is immediately back in Buck.
Oh, yeah. It's like he got over his yips, essentially. Like, he was able to put one in the win column. And I think if given his own feelings and, like, not being kind of, like, pushed or nudged out of the nest, as it were, by Bobby. And I think Bobby realized this too. He was like, we let him kind of try to deal with it his own way, by himself
but
for a little bit.
But he needs the tough love now.
He needs the tough love and, like, the gentle parenting of just kind of like, you're going to figure it out as you go. Like, here's a push of love. Good luck. And I think he knows because again, Buck is good at his job and he cares about people, that if he were able to, do this successfully, it would change the game for him again and just like help him kind of like find that balance of normalcy a little bit, or like understand how better to process and move on or let go, as it were.
And how he can, how there will be losses, but it doesn't mean that he's bad at his job and that he can continue to keep doing his job and helping people, that's important. So just important life lessons with Dad. It's another day at the 118.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So at the end of Buck and Bobby's journey in the episode, we see them back at the station after the jumper, and Buck thanks Bobby for pushing him, even when he hesitated, and Bobby tells him that he did a great job bouncing back and saving someone, which is, I think what Dad knew was exactly what he needed. But then we see Devin's sister show up at the station, and this was like the icing on the top of like the healing cake, I think, for Buck in this episode, and like she really didn't need. Yeah, like she really didn't need to go out of her way to do this. So I think it was like showed a lot of character that she did. Especially because of what she's dealing with is, unimaginable. But she, apologizes to Buck and sits down with him and explains that Devin, her brother, had a history with depression and a previous suicide attempt, and says that it wasn't his fault, that it was hers, because she had seen signs of him becoming withdrawn again. And she, called his friend and asked him to like Devin to go out of the house. And when he said yes, she was like, oh, things are going to be okay. So she blames herself. And Buck comforts her and says that there's nothing that either one of them could have done because some people just don't want to be saved.
And we kind of, come full circle with that, because if you remember, Chimney says people, well, again, in his like kind of like funny say kind of way, people do funny things and some people don't want to be saved, basically. So it's nice to see that he kind of was able to let go of that guilt that he had and accept that it's true, like there's some people just don't want to be saved.
And in doing that, he's able to help someone who is grieving, and I feel like that probably also helped him really put, again, like I said, just icing on top of the healing cake of that situation, to like, yes, he was helpless to really save her brother, but he's able to still help her.
Exactly. So. It's that paying it forward. You know how everybody says like you kind of learn better if you teach it to someone else, like or teaching someone else something is how you learn to do it better. Or however that turn of phrase goes.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Essentially, him being able to pass on some wise words that he has been able to learn and kind of like incorporate in himself and his thought processes, and how to deal with things. He's learning better by being able to pass that along to her. And then in turn, she'll probably be able to do that for someone else because she's gone through it, just kind of like an ongoing chain of you know, being there for someone or helping someone understand things like that. So it's a really nice, like, Buck spent so much of this episode trying to like think of how everybody else, or ask everybody else how they deal with stuff in order to figure out what's going to work best for him. So this was kind of him being like, this is what's working best for me. Maybe this will help you figure out for yourself as well. So again, like a nice full circle.
So we open up with Abby being late for work, and we discover that her mother locked herself in. Then there's a knock at the door, and it's a new character that we will see throughout seasons. Her name is Carla. She's a new home care nurse. And Carla just takes control of the whole situation, like, effortlessly. So she goes to where Abby's mom is locked in. She tells Abby's mom to, she walks Abby's mom to through unlocking herself, and Abby is like super ecstatic. She's impressed, and she even jokes with Carla that she should just move in with her because Carla is like a godsend.
She's like, bring your family. I don't care. Like,
she really is. Like, you can tell right off the bat, especially in comparison to the home care nurse or girl or whoever from the first episode who did not care a lick, that Carla is personable and friendly and so capable and good at her job. She just she comes in, assesses the situation so quickly, and knows exactly what to do to help Abby's mom. And in turn, like, that's helping Abby so much. I think Carla says, like, I got this, go to work, go get your life back for a little bit, which is like a whole other thing because, like, Abby's life is just like one whole big emergency essentially.
Yeah.
But to be able to give her a sense of relief like that so quickly really is such a great introduction. This show is so good at character introductions because they get it across so quickly and not
effortlessly and naturally too. Yeah. But it's you immediately see that Carla she's on time, she's great, she's immediately already solving problems, already making her mother feel, safe and cared for
and respected.
And respected, and like she's a human, you know what I mean? And so it allows her to like let go and get to work feeling like she's safe and in good hands and like she doesn't have to worry about it. And she's like overcome with gratitude and hugs Carla. And that's when she's like, you can move in here. But she says like no one has ever helped her with her mother. Like she's had to carry the burden of responsibility and the emotional weight of all of this by herself. And that is so much. And Carla even says like, what, it's okay. Like what you're being asked to do is so hard. It's literally like one long emergency.
Yeah, that was such a heartbreaking line.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's the scene on the couch, right? When they're in the couch. So, I think Carla managed to put Abby's mom to sleep, essentially.
Oh, yeah, that's later.
I think, And Abby's like feeling guilty because she's like, oh, thank God, right? That she's asleep, finally. And then she's like, does that make me a bad person? And then Carla
feels bad.
Yeah. And Carla reassures her that, it's okay to feel tired of taking care of her mom. But she's still a good person because she chooses to take care.
Yeah.
And Carla does this thing like where this is where this friendship like starts, really. Abby pretty much unloads like a lot of what she's been going through. So aside from her mom, they talk about Abby's past romantic life. So she had an ex named Tommy.
Spoilers.
No, I don't think it's the same one though, right?
We don't know that. I don't think we know that.
I like to headcanon that it is just
Me
for
too.
funsies.
Me too.
That would be
just for the plot.
Hilarious. And also like, I don't know how to feel about that, truly.
Anyway.
Invisible strings and all that.
Yeah.
Sorry, so
No, it's funny because it's so funny because in my notes I said ex-boyfriend Tommy, not to be confused with Tommy. Anyway, we learn that he broke up with her, and she didn't like that because she didn't give him permission to. And I mean, that actually says a lot about her.
Yeah,
it really does.
Might have some control issues, possibly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mayhaps.
Not a far stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. Which kind of gives you insight into how extra hard the situation with her mother has to be, because again, it's something she doesn't have any control over.
Exactly. And nobody's been there to help her, so she has to have control because she's the only one that's going to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, and she loves her mother. She doesn't. Anyway, I was like, that's spoilers. I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, so I did want to say that the very first time we see Abby on the screen in this episode, she is like rushing to get ready for work, and she's like walking out of her room, and then like the news is on, and she hears the name firefighter Evan Buckley, and she immediately is like reverse back into the room to stare at the TV and staring at it until her mom's calling for her because she's stuck. So then fast forward again, we're back on the couch. And we see Buck on the TV again, and Abby, I think they were like mid-sentence or something, but she basically does the like lean forward, her jaw drops.
She has like the Buck radar.
She's gone national.
Yeah. I had a note because of my Marvel tendencies that the headline is County Fair Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the episode, Buck says that he lives for this Daredevil stuff. And I was like, they did this for me.
Those are two excellent Marvel references in one, which leads me to believe like it's not an accident. Just saying.
No, it's not.
And so when Abby sees this on the TV and Carla is kind of like looking
Carla
at her reaction.
She peeps that immediately.
Exactly. And
she's there for the goss.
And it kind of seems already that Carla is a little clued in to Abby's relationship with Buck, or how Abby kind of knows him a little bit, or will soon be clued in, because she just encourages Abby to be like, oh, you know him? Why don't you call him? Like, or
no, but like the first thing that she says, yeah, but like the first thing that she says is like, that big hunk of, what is it, firefighter?
Oh my god, I can't remember. I think it was like big hunk of man meat or something ridiculous. Yeah,
and I think
I love Carla.
Same.
Carla just says it like it is. So real.
She is. But this was a callback from the interview we mentioned earlier, where the journalist, quote unquote, says like, "Oh, people on Twitter want to know if you're single," and he hems and haws and does not answer the question. And Abby's like, he didn't answer the question. And Carla's like, oh, you want an answer to that question. And what does she say? She says something about like firemen being dogs or whatever.
Yeah.
Especially like pretty ones with, birthmarks or whatever. And says, but he's a dog, you're a cougar, own it.
So you see Carla is really kind of taking on this role of confidant and friend, because like Abby doesn't really have anyone to rely on
to talk to
or talk to, because it's not that she can really talk to her mom, because her mom keeps bringing up stuff about that previous relationship, which ended so poorly. And it's got to be so hard to, keep her mom updated on these things and have her remember and be able to hold like actual conversations. Like she can't even ask her mom for advice on stuff like this. So to have Carla come in and not only like take care of her mom, but essentially take care of Abby is something that she's needed. And she gives her like a little bit of a boost of confidence, or a little bit like, why don't you kind of be courageous and stuff and, contact him? Because I think Abby was the one that was saying like, yeah, I was thinking about calling him, because you can also tell too that Abby being like really emotionally intelligent, which she has to be for her job as well. Like she can kind of see what we picked up on, where Buck was not very comfortable in that interview and is kind of down on himself. So Carla's the one that like really says you should contact him and you should call him and everything.
I think she literally like sorry. She literally like forces her hand though. She's like, I'm just gonna sit here, like, because I need to see what happens. And I was like, okay.
It's that push, that gentle nudge or push out the nest. Very similar to Bobby and Buck.
Yeah.
It's a kind of similar dynamic there.
And I kind of want to like touch upon Abby's like skills. Like, not only is she like emotionally intelligent, she has to be emotionally intelligent even like at her job. So she's like picking up on like things that Buck isn't necessarily saying in these interviews, or like she can hear that voice. Obviously, she could see it in his face. Like he's not okay, like at all.
Yeah, I think she says like everybody's treating him like a hero, but he doesn't feel like one. And, you know, she can pick up, you know, what we can because we're audience members and we can kind of see more into his character. But I think, you know, anyone who has like emotional intelligence could like look at someone going through that and be like, they're not doing so hot. But I think she also says because, you know, we talked about all the fun little bits about like Abby kind of being thirsty for Buck and Carla encouraging it. But she really does say like her interest in him has a lot to do with like him making her feel seen in the first episode. She's like, It's the first person in years to like thank me on my job and make me feel like I also was good at what I did, and said like, said good job. Like I feel like I was a hero, and said good job, Abby. And you know, so it's not just like, oh, he's sad and hot and
I must comfort him.
I could adopt him. Yeah.
No, there is a very like deep connection between Buck and Abby where, you know, Abby feels like Buck saw her, and in turn she feels like she's seeing him and letting him feel seen as well. And that also kind of leads me to believe that, you know, she has also felt those same things too. Like imagine her first couple months on the job as a 911 dispatcher. She explained all of this in the pilot episode where, you know, she either doesn't get to know like how a call turned out, whether it was happy or sad. Sometimes she does find out and she'd rather not.
Yeah.
So also like how she has to deal and process feelings of grief and loss when she hears it, but also how to process and let go of the ones that she doesn't know how they turn out, which might be or have the potential to be like even more haunting than the ones where you do know the outcome. So I think she really deeply understands what he's going through. And I think that's why they develop such a unique bond that I don't really see anyone else having in that same kind of sense so far in the show.
Yeah.
Because you have like the firefighters in Athena, and they kind of show how they're able to let go of things, but it's more of just kind of like, you kind of have to brush it off. Not to say that they don't feel it deeply. Obviously they have, but we really see how like ingrained and how much both Abby and Buck care so deeply. So it's like they're very on equal footing. That makes sense.
Yeah. Later in the episode, we see that Carla and Abby and her mother are out at lunch, and Carla again is egging Abby on to go for it and ask Buck out. So we'll talk about how that call goes in a minute, but she returns to the table. She walked away to do the phone call. When she returns, she says that she got shot down, but she's smiling. And Carla's like confused, and she's like, you know, just sometimes it's better to get a no for the right reasons rather than a yes for the wrong ones. So we'll get into Abby and Buck now. So the first call that we get to see is Abby's a little crazy. So
no, Carla, affectionate. It's not Carla. Sorry, Abby is so me after this call.
She calls Buck for the first time after Carla's encouragement, like we talked about, and she goes into her bedroom and closes the door. And Buck's like, he says, "Oh yeah, I remember you. You're a badass." And then he's like, "How did you get this number?" She's like, "Oh, it was on the case file."
It's fine.
Just kind of glossed over that, and he was like, "Haha, that's fine."
He likes the attention. He's not really concerned with.
Yeah, listen, he's
privacy issues.
No. But there were no red flags flagging for him. He was just like, "Oh, she wanted to talk to me." And then she says, that she wanted to check on him. And he's like, "Oh my God, thank you for noticing. Everyone just keeps calling me hero, and I don't feel like one." And you just really see that it's the first time he really feels like seen in this episode. And so it's this like little moment of like, I don't want to say like sunlight, but it's like kind of like the clouds parting a little bit. So it's not as gloomy.
The silver lining.
The silver lining, yeah. And he talks about his feelings and his frustration that you don't really hear him get into that much detail with anyone else in the episode. So it's interesting to see like how instantly he feels okay opening up to her like that.
Mm.
So he describes his frustration just like not understanding why this person would let go. And she says that some people she said some people you'd be surprised use this situation like as an opportunity. And some people just don't want to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually, come full circle and still did mention that like Chimney did say something to that effect too. But I really think that it was like the Abby line that like stuck in his head.
Yes.
that took
that's
root
exactly
in there.
It. Yeah, because we already mentioned like that's the advice that he gives to Devin's sister Liz.
Yeah. At the end.
But it really makes sense too that the little key phrase that Abby gives him is what helps him the most out of everyone's kind of different like option A, option B. And I think it's because they have that kind of kinship and understanding of each other. Like just as characters, they seem kind of similar at the core, at the root in how much they care. Obviously, they conduct themselves very differently.
Oh yeah.
But like underneath it all, they seem very, very similar. And I think that's why Abby's advice is the thing that helps Buck the most, because like if it works for her, it works for him too because of that
connection.
Yeah, that kinship, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And also like they might be trauma bonding a little bit.
I mean, they are, because she does talk about like the dead silence.
Yeah.
They are trauma bonding because like Abby does also provide what she goes through as a dispatcher when she has to listen to dead silence, because there are bad calls where they have dead silence and she doesn't know either A, what happened to them, or B, she just has to assume that they're gone.
Yeah. Well, she also tells him about her mom and what she's dealing with too. So they have that kind of like equal, like give and take sort of thing.
Rapport.
Yeah, rapport. It's not a witty repartee. It's sad. And yeah, so there's like an equal give and take there.
Well, Buck is super appreciative after this call, and he wants them to talk again soon. And it's just funny. After they hang up, Abby does the most realist thing that a girly girl can do. She's one of the girls.
Yeah, that secondhand embarrassment was so real.
Oh, the cringing was so real.
Oh, he loved it though. He was like, "This is amazing." He was eating it up. He loves
really,
cringe.
really corny sign off line of, you can call me or call 911.
Call 911. Makes this like faint face.
Like her silent cringe. Yeah. I'm so glad they did the coverage.
Hangs up and collapses back on the bed. Like, you're so real for that.
We've all experienced that. It's like you hear it coming out of your own mouth and you're like, I know this is just,
what am I? And she's saying it. She's like, what am I saying? What did I just say? Yeah, it was a great moment.
And that also kind of like showcases how she's really doesn't conduct herself in this kind of manner.
No.
Or she's a little like rusty, whereas in the pilot episode, Buck was very, like he made a lot of connections with women in multiple different ways.
Connections. That's what the kids are called.
Wow.
Yeah. And the newest came on
like he's
the
on
New York
LinkedIn.
Times.
Well, he was linked to something.
Didn't know we used LinkedIn for that.
Why do you call it LinkedIn? That was so bad. No, absolutely not. So it just shows like how this is not like Abby's game, right? Like, this is not what she typically does, or how she really operates, but she was given like that bolster from Carla. So it's just kind of funny to see that like opposite there.
Yeah, and you see Buck like is already charmed by her, and he, again, just smoothed over her getting his number in a weird way, and was like, "We should talk again." So he opens up that channel to like give her permission to contact him again, which leads to her calling him later to ask him on a date. And Buck has to like very awkwardly because it's Buck, but he's also honest and vulnerable, like turn her down and talk about how like he's realizing that he has some issues with intimacy and that the problem is that he really likes her and he doesn't want those issues to show up in this relationship before it can really get started. So he wants to keep talking the way that they are. So like he lets her down, but also is like, but I want to keep talking to you because I am interested. But it's nice that he's, honest with himself and with her that like really shouldn't go to the part where there's any chance of us like being intimate until I try and explore my own issues. But the start of that phone call.
Oh God.
Buck is like, can I ask you a question? How old are you? And she's like, why? And he's like, because you keep calling me. And then goes on like, like people my age, we text or we Facebook or we this or we that. Like if it's really serious, we like Snapchat or something like that. He brings up Marco Polo, which really dates when this is from.
What the hell is Marco Polo?
You don't even need to worry about it. I don't even know if it's a thing anymore.
I am also not hip to the jive of the kids.
But yeah, and then she's like cringing because she's like, oh.
Not what she wanted
like I gave myself away.
Have to answer,
yeah, and she doesn't really say how old she is. But she's like, oh, I guess it's just my most comfortable form of communication because I'm used to talking on the phone all day for work. I just thought that was hilarious and adorable.
Yeah. And it really shows also, Buck turning her down in like a nice way. Shows how much he values their relationship already. Especially, that he's willing to communicate in this like old school, old fashioned. I think he says like both of those in this kind of like outdated method.
He said it was old fashioned. Yeah.
But it's also because it like being able to hear someone's voice as opposed to like just reading their texts or their snaps or whatever, or just seeing a picture like that opens the door up for that vulnerability that they've already kind of built together. So it's funny because he makes fun of her about it, but it's really sweet.
But it's in a very like affectionate, I don't know, just the way I would love to get like razzed by him because it would just be, you know what I mean? It would just be the most charming razz of my life. So it's like somehow he's doing it, but also flirting. And I'm just like, how do you do this?
Like, let me just read this. Because I know we've only talked a couple times, so talking to you makes me feel really good and safe and curious about life because I can tell that you're special. Shut up! Shut up! And I don't have anyone like you in my life, and I don't want to do anything to risk losing you. Excuse me. Men, take notes. People, take notes. That is cute.
He is giving
Because it was honest.
man written by a woman energy, like at almost any given moment.
Wait, who wrote this?
Not women.
Oh, not women.
Not women?
But like they get it.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like
They're girlies that get it. Ryan Murphy, Brad Falchuk, Tim Minear. The girlies that
Yes.
get it.
Thank you for giving us Buck.
Yes.
What a gift.
My sunshine.
He is sunshine, which is why it's so hard to see him not be sunshine in this episode for most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a really good journey and development, and good to see him growing so much already, like even in the second episode.
Mm-hmm.
This brings us to the Athena portion of the evening. My notes for her are somewhat short because she didn't have a lot of meat, but I felt like we needed.
It was a 4-bagger.
Oh my god.
With the hamburgers.
Get out of here.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
She's
it was
like, I wanted to eat one on the way home.
Oh, you should have got
I wanted to have one for lunch.
Well, as we talked about previously with Buck, we do see Athena join the 118 for dinner,
Yes.
but
Mhm.
and Hen invites her. So,
Yeah.
you know, Hen and Athena, this is where we really establish that they are friends. Hen is privy to a lot of things that Athena is going through. But yeah, she joins the 118 for dinner to avoid going to have dinner at home because of her issues, you know, the current situation that she has with Michael. Then it doesn't cut, but I mean, she has
But the next time we see her,
yeah,
is at home, I think, in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's another chilly school morning at the Grant household.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
She's pretty much still in avoiding and ignoring mode with Michael, but like they're trying to get the kids out the door for school, and May is still in bed, and they're trying to get her out because they gotta go. And she's like, "I'm sick." And Athena's like, yeah, do you have a school assignment that you didn't do? Or
It was very like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
yeah, very much like, well, what parents say, like if you aren't visibly sick to them, they're like, what are you trying to get out of? But she's like, I said I'm sick, and turns back over, and Michael like kind of takes over, and he's like, why don't you like get going? You know, I'll take care of this and I'll get her situated. And it's like the first time you see her in that whole scene, like give any sort of like warmth towards him, just like a little bit of appreciation for him, like handling the situation.
And you can see like how, I guess, their partnership as husband and wife, like that dynamic was for so much of their marriage. Like honestly, like when you think about it, we don't see them like in love. We see them hurting and separately. But there must have been like a really strong foundation for them to even like get this far. So it's nice to be able to see like you said earlier with Buck, like the clouds kind of parting and seeing like a little ray of sunshine. Like that's kind of a glimpse into how they
are there for each other, how they
used to operate as a family. Exactly.
They're a team. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I feel like, I don't know if you guys like picked up on it, but like there was a scene with he offers her coffee.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, no. And then right after, you know, him saying that he's going to help with May, she takes that coffee. And I feel like it kind of symbolizes I feel like it symbolizes that, you know, that she
olive branch.
Like the olive branch, like and
accepted it,
symbolizes that teamwork that they still will continue to have.
Ooh, good catch. I didn't pick up on that at all. And then
I was just picking up on the chilliness.
Yeah. No, that's actually so interesting then, because if Athena then accepts that olive branch of the coffee from Michael, she also kind of like passing along the advice that we see in the episode when she's at dinner at the 118, she's also giving Buck, like extending an olive branch to him as well. So it's like you kind of see the threads of how one action can kind of like feed into another or like pay it forward sort of situation.
Yeah.
Sorry, just bringing it back to that too. But
so then we get to see Athena in a really ridiculous call, which is a man
Wait, let's talk about before she gets to...
Yes,
this woman
so good.
rolls up in her police cruiser to like a I don't know, a burger joint drive-through, whatever.
Yeah.
And she goes through the front of the line and she's like, back it up.
Official police business, of course.
Official police business.
Oh, it's so funny. And she orders, I don't remember really how many burgers it was, but I know she just...
It was like 4.
4 burgers, a fry, and a root beer, I think. And
yeah, just like totally butts her way into the drive-thru instead of like waiting her time. Because I mean, granted, we don't know this yet, but she is going to a call. But just the way she kind of like, it's, I wouldn't really say it's an abuse of authority, but it's like, it's hilarious because she kind of like, you know, it's a necessary thing. And what she uses it for is like a very smart,
genius
kind of solution.
She is very smart.
But just the way she kind of like
went about getting
asserted her authority.
Yeah.
And utilized the resources at hand, let's say, was so funny. And it looks like when she like rolls up into the window, you know, bumper to bumper in front of the other car that was about to order. And she's just like very familiar with the worker there. She's like, "Hey girl, give me like this has happened so many times."
So many times.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, that girl has a system for any kind of frequent call, I'm sure. Yeah. She's so fucking funny. So then we flash forward to her pulling up to this scene where a man is standing on a kitchen island in a home, like squirting 2 Dobermans with water who are just barking at him. Like, let it be noted that they were not like trying to get up on the island because they probably could have. They were just like barking at him.
Yeah. It looks like they bit him as well.
Yeah, that's true. Probably before he got up on the island.
Like they really kind of had him cornered, but they didn't. Yeah. It was like aggressive barking, but it wasn't like full attack mode.
Yeah, no.
It wasn't like
they were feral.
Yeah. But because they were Dobermans, they were also like fairly like intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Hen is already there waiting for her when she shows up because Chimney already ran away.
He just like backed right on out of there, and
he's like, I'm just gonna let you handle this, and if you think it's because I am a coward, you are exactly right.
And I love it because that's like one of those moments that we see Chimney like totally just being himself, like unapologetically, and not trying to like, big himself
put on
up
some sort of front
to anyone. Yeah, he's just like, yeah, I'm out. You got this. Appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, she's like, what kind of situation do we got? And Hen is like, kind of slides the door so she can look over, and she's like, oh man, a 4-bagger. I was hoping I could take one with me for lunch. But they effortlessly work together to lead the dogs into the pantry by using the burgers as bait and, close them in there so that the guy can get out safe. Was so funny. And so, I don't know, I think it showed a lot about like how they work together, not just like as coworkers who probably run into each other a lot on calls, but like as friends. Then we see Athena outside of the scene, and Hen sidles up to her and is like, oh, did you catch like that man like flirting with you? Like there was heat
or smoke, fire.
Just trying to like encourage her to like get some.
Kind of like how Carla was encouraging to Abby a little bit. So we've got that kind of like mirror of that kind of relationship there too.
Yeah, definitely. Athena's like, well, then he's more of a dog than the Dobermans because I have my ring on. And Hen's like, spoiler alert, your husband's gay. So like, you're not divorced now. You will be soon, basically.
That's another little bit of tough love.
Yeah.
Which we will learn it was a relevant thing to say because the next thing we see is Athena and Michael in therapy. And the way that they did this was they cut it back and forth with Buck in therapy, and it was very nicely done. Like that was a very good segue from some of Athena's answers to Buck's answers. It was just really good, smart camera work, and like, I don't know, just the way that they planned that just pleased my brain so much.
Yeah.
really kind of set them up as Buck and Athena, from the first episode who were on like total opposite ends of the spectrum. It kind of like brings them together like in a mirror sort of way, because I think some of the editing choices they had there were, the other one kind of finishing the other one's
sentences.
Yeah, exactly.
Not in exactly the same kind of way or the exact same kind of question, but in a way that like makes sense. So you're kind of seeing, how Buck is dealing with the loss of the call, and then how Athena is also having difficulty letting go of her marriage.
Yeah, I think the cut that really got to me is when Buck says, "I'm not scared," and Athena says, "I'm angry."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I wonder if that was intentional to show that there's some level of Buck that is angry about the situation, and not just at himself, like, because we know he's angry with himself, but maybe he is angry, at this guy for not just reaching up. Yeah, and then I'm sure he feels more guilty about that, about being angry at a dead person.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting though, because we really don't see him express any of that anger. So it must be like, if there is any, it must be like so much further down. Whereas Athena, hers always sits like right at the surface. Like I think she tends to use her anger kind of like an armor sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting to see like how easily she can tap into that, whereas Buck is not, or at least not in a way that is like bringing it up to the surface. So it must be like really deep down in there. So just an interesting thing.
So I think one of the big things that Athena said that stuck with me, that she doesn't like to be made a fool, and that was exactly how she was feeling, how she was made to feel in this situation. But she confesses that Michael was right about her knowing. He accused her in the first episode of knowing that he was gay. And she said, "You're right. I did know, and I ignored it because that's how much I wanted to make a family with you."
Mm-hmm. And that like acceptance of her denial also shows like a lot of growth, even just between the first episode and this one, which is really interesting to see. So like she's having to face a lot of that kind of stuff like within herself, and then to be able to speak to it like so openly and like confide in Michael in that situation says a lot too, because it seems like she also is someone to kind of like, we saw she buried this like down deep.
Yeah.
She had to like pull it back up. It seemed like she had made some peace with what she thought their life could look moving forward. Maybe this kind of plays into that denial a little bit again, where she's like, acknowledging that they still love each other. They will always have love for each other.
Right. So she basically says that she can't live in a loveless marriage, but will compromise with a sexless marriage. But unfortunately, like that compromise kind of gets shattered because Michael admits in that moment that he actually has met someone.
Yeah.
Which devastates Athena.
Like one step forward with that olive branch of her accepting that coffee, and then 2 steps back. Like major kind of, she has to reassess everything.
It just rocks her foundation because her family is her foundation. And, I think every time she takes a step towards reality, it's like a baby one. And then she like builds another structure in her mind where she's like, okay, well, I can accept this. But then, okay, everything else will stay the same by doing this or not doing this. And then that next thing is also, thrown out. So I think this is like probably Lammy that kind of has to wake her up to like, okay, like this isn't like her marriage is over.
She has to then face the entire loss of this marriage, like that she was like trying to kind of salvage together. And it's like, that's not going to work.
So over.
I think it's because he says that he met someone and it wasn't that he really wanted to have a marriage where he could be in love with the person. It wasn't like I want to co-parent with you. I want us to be friends, but I want us to get divorced because in the future I would like to, have a fulfilling full relationship with someone. It's I already met someone.
Yeah. So
it's circling back to that thing where she said earlier, like she doesn't like to be made a fool. And he just did it again, all over again, made her feel like a fool.
So like to tie it back to when she's talking to Hen about what, like she didn't want to like pursue is he like the burglar? Like,
Mhm.
she didn't want to pursue that guy at all.
Oh yeah, we forgot to say that he was a burglar.
We just glossed over that.
Yeah, so like she didn't want to pursue the burglar.
Because he's a burglar.
Because yes, but like before she found that out, Hen was like, hey, like,
Yeah.
hey, look, you can get with this guy. You can get it with him. But like she's like, no, because like her vows were still important to her.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then, hey, Michael just admits that he met someone. So it's almost like, okay, like you made a fool out of me in that regard as well.
Yeah.
Because you kind of like you didn't talk to me about that. So she's in her police cruiser. She's stalking the burglar. I wish I remembered his name. I hate calling him burglar. So she's stalking him, and like she calls him up because she gets the number from the report.
Like someone else we know.
Like someone else we know. So before she does that, she's looking at her visor, and there's a picture of Michael. And she like slams it up close. And that to me is kind of like, that's where she kind of lets go of her vows, basically, because she said, well, he met someone. I mean, I'm not going to feel guilty for, even though like she doesn't want anything with this guy, but she does have to play up like flirting, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like really interesting kind of how like she went from, no, I don't want to flirt with this guy to, even though it's just for the job.
So this poor burglar, kind of feel bad for him.
He didn't know what was coming to him.
No, he did not know what was coming because she was having a bad day. And not only did her husband make her feel like a fool, but this guy made her feel like a fool because, you know, she helped him and he got to go away free because she didn't realize that he was a burglar until after he'd already been taken away by the EMTs, right? And then the owner shows up. And then she has this great one-liner that I can't remember, but she always has the best one-liners.
Yeah, it was something about like your dogs are fine, but your home's been burglarized, and I let him get away.
And I let him get away.
Or I let him go.
So yeah, she said it.
She
doesn't like to be made to feel a fool, and she's already super high emotions from her therapy session with Michael, where she was trying to let go of being made to feel a fool one time, and she's like, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times, this guy. So she's tracking him down. And she does this, you know, this weird flirting thing with him. And then is like, do you like dogs, Dobermans? And he's like, who is this? I forget what she says after that to like identify herself or like, or how did you find me? I don't know. And she's like, you called 911, dumbass.
Yeah. Oh, she mentions right before then, he was like, you know, who is this? And she's like, you told me to call you when I needed a real man, sort of thing. You know, like an interesting thing when you put in the context of what she and Michael are going through. And she's really she's like using this opportunity to track down this guy that she let go to really redeem herself, not only to right the wrong that, you know, as a police officer, she didn't kind of clue into the fact that this guy was breaking into some other person's house, but also like a personal win as well. Like she needs to be able to feel like she did something productive, she did something good.
She had to feel like she outsmarted someone.
Yeah, she needed to feel smart and in control. And I really don't know if good was a motivator here. I think that she wanted to punish this man for making her feel stupid, for making her feel foolish.
Yep.
And so she, you know, when she catches him, he tries to run and she like gets a little rough with him. And then another police officer has to like be like, Athena, like Officer Grant, like
chill,
Sergeant Grant. Calm down.
She's really taken out all of her anger and her frustration and her humiliation out in a productive means. But it is definitely not just about, you know,
no, it's
bringing this guy into custody.
It's not.
And then.
So then Athena goes home. Harry is in the living room and he says that Michael is out. And she's like, of course he is. So she goes to check on May, especially because she stayed home sick. And we see her like walking back in there, like calling for her. May's not answering. And she's like, oh, like damn music, so loud. Thinking that's why she couldn't hear her. And then when she opens the door, She immediately sees some empty pill bottles and then turns the corner and sees May on the floor. We end with a 911 call with Athena's voice saying that her daughter overdosed and she thinks that she's dead.
So what a way to like have a win and then bring her right back down a peg. It's that one step forward, 2 steps back, which of course no one ever wants to see like anyone they know, friend, family member, like in that kind of situation.
It's interesting when you try to compare how Buck and Athena begin in this episode and then how we ended the episode, because Buck was able to let go of, what he was going through. And now Athena is in this spot where I feel like the advice that she gives Buck is a little bit deconstructed. And Athena, she arrives without her uniform on. With her uniform, she sees, again, those crazy inhumane things happening. She is now witnessing in her own home where she's taken that uniform off. Crazy and inhumane thing.
Yeah.
Oof.
That is seeing her daughter there, lying there. That is something that she will not let go of.
No. How could you, like, as a parent?
No.
Finding your kid like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really great catch, so.
Yeah.
Yay!
Lots of good catches this episode. Oh my God. Yeah, no, that's crazy. That is like the exact inverse of the advice. And like we see her kind of like really put together at the beginning of the episode. And like she's, wise and imparting this information to Buck. And then at the end, we see that Buck is kind of in the position that she was in at the beginning.
Yeah.
And now she is in an even worse place. Where it is kind of mirroring that situation where Buck was on a call with someone who just let go, who didn't want to continue trying, and now she's holding her daughter in her arms at home. And
there's nothing that she can really do about it either.
And she doesn't have the answers, like in this current moment.
No.
Why did this happen?
Yeah, I don't even know if she's thinking about that in that moment. She's probably just thinking like how to save her.
Yeah.
But, she does mention in the episode that, the kid, that May has barely said 2 words to them since Michael came out. She's going to start blaming herself, probably blaming Michael a little bit too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, it's interesting then. So like what you said, you kind of see how the advice that she gave does not actually always work for her, right? Because she, like, having felt the anger in her personal life and in her marriage, and she uses that to fuel her professional life in that kind of way, where it's like, yes, she's doing the right thing by tracking down this criminal, but the fuel to the fire, as it were, stems from her personal life. So when she's taking off her civilian clothes and putting on her uniform, there's not that like break there, and vice versa. So even though she says, like, oh, it'll pass when you take off that uniform, like it's that very stark break. Maybe she hasn't found the right way to process things as Buck kind of has learned.
Yeah.
This
leads us to our scene dissection. Like we said earlier, we're going to be talking about Buck in therapy, a content warning again for this section. We'll be thoroughly discussing Buck sleeping with his therapist and diving into the sexual misconduct, abusive nature of this. So we open with an uncomfortable Buck sitting on a couch in therapy, and he's expressing that like he's I'm not really into feelings. I mean, feeling them, yeah, just not, talking about them, which is so real of him. What a mood. But yeah, that's just a really simple way to put the emotional state of Buck as a character, as we know him in these first 2 episodes, that he is not good at being vulnerable or opening up or even, showing his feelings, not with words. So trying to express them with words is brand new territory for him.
But we also see, like, especially in the scene that immediately precedes the therapy scene, is when Buck is talking and confiding in Bobby. So we actually, like, he's saying that he's not really into talking about his feelings, but we just came off a scene where is again, unprompted, like kind of confiding in Bobby and telling him some of his really deep innermost thoughts, concerns. So I think the dichotomy there is really how he can open up when he has a sense of trust and respect in someone.
Mhm.
Because like Bobby is someone he obviously like very much looks up to, and they've
Mhm.
built that rapport there. So it's so much, and Abby as well will include in this too.
Mhm.
They have built a rapport, they have a trust, they have a connection for each of them. So he actually is pretty forthwith or like forthcoming with
Mhm.
more than he thinks with his emotions. But because this is a professional setting, he's already kind of like on the back in that sort of way because it's something that he's uncomfortable with. It's someone that he doesn't know. And
Mhm.
like, why would he trust someone that he doesn't know with his
Yeah.
deep feelings and thoughts?
Well, it's also incredibly hard for him to open up even to people that he does deeply trust, respect. So I think this talking about feelings thing is literally brand new. Like I think
Mm.
as much as we have seen it is like as much as he has really done on a deep basis probably up to this point.
And that's probably to the benefit of like Bobby kind of set that in place. Like you kind of see him leading the 118 in that kind of way. So in order to kind of like feel more belonging in his workplace, sort of like that,
Mhm.
like he has to assess like that's what's going to work best in that kind of environment. So Buck's kind of like following Bobby's lead on that. And it is new, so it is like kind of uncomfortable, but he's doing it
Yeah.
essentially.
So basically, the therapist is trying to get him to talk about like why he can't let go of this particular incident, and he talks about how it was his first loss. And I think this is where he says he's only been on the job not even 6 months. I think this is also where he expresses a little bit that he is angry.
It is.
Yeah, I think he says he can't quite feeling that the call with the roller coaster didn't have to go down that way.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep.
But then the therapist, she prompts him by saying like, but is there anything that he could have done differently? I'm assuming to try to help him reframe it. Like if he keeps
Right.
ruminating on like, it didn't have to go down that way, you're kind of looking
Mhm.
more at well, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if this
Mhm.
happened? Which is not a productive cycle of thought. So by reframing and focusing on could he have done anything differently, that's like putting him back in like the power seat essentially. Like if he realizes that he did everything kind of like by the book or everything in his power, like
Mhm.
from with his knowledge about the job, what they were able to do, especially with like being in at the right angle sort of thing. So
Mhm.
that's why I think he had to climb up there in the first
Yeah.
place. So like given all of these variables, what else could he have done or what he
Mhm.
could have done differently puts him in I guess gives him a sense of control back as well, but also realizing like in that instance he didn't have control over anything else. So
Mhm.
therefore absolved.
But he's still ruminating because he's still like, I was right there. Like he could have just reached out, and he still is just circling on this thought over and over again. And she gets up and walks over and sits on the table, like right in front of him, and like puts her hand on his shoulder or leg or something.
It's his knee.
It's
I
his
think
knee.
yeah,
Okay.
which is a little
Anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute.
mhm.
Anyway, she says something like, I can't help you get into Devin's head. We're here to help you get into yours or something like that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And up until that moment in this entire scene, we just see Buck really emotional, like a range of all these different, you know, traumatic turmoil. And there are tears in his eyes and he's just kind of wrecked. But, she's in his space and she is touching him. And then he kind of goes, "Can I ask you a question? Did you friend me on Facebook?" And then his demeanor changes.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting there that, when he gets like kind of visibly emotional, like he's starting to tear up. He's kind of opening up a little bit because of the question that she asked him, like what could he have done differently. So he kind of like starts, being a little more open about his thoughts. That like being more visibly vulnerable, and also like I think a tear does fall. That is when she crosses that physical boundary and puts her hand on his knee. And I just wanted to point out, like, that's an interesting moment to choose to do that, because it was like previously when he was very standoffish, they filmed it so it was like a wide shot and you saw one of them on one side of the room and the other. And she is the one that, like you said, she does get in his face, but it's only after that point where he becomes like more
open and vulnerable.
Which, like, he wasn't opening up his space, he was opening up his head space, I guess.
Brain. Yeah. Anyway, she's like, oh, that was before you became my therapist. Like, I friend requested you on Facebook. That was before, this session was booked. Like, you should delete that. Which pissed me off, because it's like, well, no, you should have deleted it, or you should have not accepted him as a patient.
Because isn't she like a department counselor?
Yeah.
So she is employed by the fire department.
She is.
To talk to these people. So like anyone in the department could potentially be her
And the
patient.
thing is that she's a trauma specialist, which is what makes this, I mean, it's icky, but it makes it especially icky that she's like, I deal with people who go through this stuff on a regular basis. And it is very much taking advantage of someone who is in a very vulnerable state.
Exactly. Okay, so essentially, I kind of noticed a theme regarding Buck in this episode of him being pursued, like in a romantic sense kind of thing. And he continuously has like a fairly passive role in those instances. So the first couple is when he's being interviewed by the news, like that second time that they come and interview him during the day. And the reporter asks him, people on Twitter want to know if you're single. And he is like very put off by that, because obviously he's not in a good headspace. But that's like one example of, people kind of pursuing him. And then you also get the whole thing with the therapist where he is trying to himself and what's going on in his head. And she is the one that abuses her power and comes onto him. But you also get this with Abby as well, when she and her mom and Carla are out having ice cream, and Abby is the one to ask him out on a date. He is the one to say no. Like, he doesn't say, again, outright no. He says not at this point in time because of the things that he's learned, which you'll get into. But I just thought that was like a really interesting, him take that complete opposite role. And of course, he's not in the headspace to regard it in any way that's like complimentary or anything like that. I just noticed that for a couple things, and it's most glaringly obvious with the therapist. He is also like kind of framed, especially in the first episode, as this like, swaggy kind of guy who, there's a lot of like, I think you expect a lot of toxic masculinity out of him. And while we saw that in the first episode, we really don't see that at all.
Yeah, no. It is toned down like a lot.
Yeah, because I think we talked about, I mean, I'll talk some more in another segment, but we talked about in the first episode how we think felt like a lot of that was a mask.
Exactly.
And so now that he feels comfortable with his, with the 118, feels comfortable in his space there, and he had his kind of like come to Jesus moment of like not putting on this kind of stuff anymore. It's like he doesn't feel like he needs to, because he was doing it to seek out intimacy, to seek out some kind of connection, beyond physical. But that was like the only way that he knew to go about it.
And to see then that he's kind of like just really brushing all of these, even in his mind, if he were in a better state, they would be like potential opportunities for connection. And he's just like really brushing it off, which says a lot about, again, where his head is, but also that he's kind of not hiding behind that kind of facade at this moment in time until
right now
he takes a beat after the therapist comes onto him, and then he kind of reverts back, and he's the one that kind of like, shuts down all of the emotion sort of things, and is then the one
because it is a safe mask.
Exactly, because that's that's how they go from being like therapized to, and I think that kind of like is his way of gathering like a semblance of control, but also like given the situation, it gives him a semblance of, I guess, what he would consider consent, but is so like not.
Yeah, you can't really give consent in that situation.
No, but I'm thinking like in his mind, that's what made sense, even though like the situation, that is not possible.
Yeah, but he definitely feels some type of way after this event too. And so there's some part of him that feels icky about it and is like, I think I have issues with intimacy.
Yeah, because he's able to acknowledge that.
Yeah, but it's like, it took this very gross experience to do that. It's unfortunate. But I just wanted to get a little bit into, and please cut me off if you have comments, because I'm just going to be reading some direct quotes and then elaborating on some things I did research into. First of all, the APA Ethics Code, which is the American Psychological Association, and the Association of Directors of Psychology Training Clinics. And then I also have 2 California codes.
So this is kind of like going to go into the deep dive and the real world like
this
application.
Is the deep dive of the real world applications. And I think it does give insight into how I started watching the show in the 2nd season. And I saw, before I went back and watched the first, I saw a couple times people talking about how Buck had been SA'd, and I was like, oh, and then I like looked it up and they said that he had sex with his therapist, and I was like, okay, and I didn't like really like look more into it. I was like, I'll see what that is all about when I get there. But I definitely felt gross while watching it. It was
it's very uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable, and I don't know the intention that went behind like how it was written, but I definitely feel like it is played off for laughs a little bit, which is, probably in character for Buck, but did not help. So I just wanted to talk about how this was a serious thing that happened that should not have happened, and just touch on the real world like rules around this and why it's wrong, other than just being in a position of power. So this is directly quoted from goodtherapy.org. They're talking about dual relationships, which are when the therapist has like a secondary relationship or a connection to a patient outside of just their traditional client-therapist bond. So the APA Ethics Code forbids therapists from being sexually intimate with current clients due to ethical conflicts of interest. Likewise, therapists should not take on clients with whom they've been intimate in the past. They do allow therapists to pursue a romantic relationship with a former client, assuming at least 2 years have passed since the therapy ended. But even that kind of relationship is still highly discouraged, frowned upon. On the surface, sexual dual relationships may appear to occur between 2 consenting adults. However, the nature of therapy puts a client in a uniquely vulnerable position. Therapy often involves sharing intimate thoughts and emotionally raw experiences. The client may be reluctant to share these things with a romantic partner, leading them to either avoid important issues in therapy or to cross their personal boundaries. This is exactly what happened. He was trying to avoid important issues.
It was a classic Buck deflect sort of thing.
Yeah, but any therapist worth their salt should have deflected that right back. But she shouldn't have been in his personal space. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Research suggests most clients who have sex with their therapists ultimately view this intimacy as harmful. Even clients who initially enjoyed the sex generally found it exploitative in hindsight. These feelings may increase the client's symptoms of depression, suppressed anger, or suicidal ideation. The client may be more likely to isolate themselves and mistrust others, making it harder for them to receive adequate care in the future.
And that's all just to really say that it does way more harm.
Yeah.
Actively harms from someone who's supposed to be there to help a patient. It's what is it, the oath that doctors or nurses take? It's the do no harm. Yeah, that's going.
This is harm.
100 immediately completely against.
Yep. And while we don't see obviously right now long-term ramifications of this, we do see immediate ones already. that like, okay, yeah, maybe he realizes he has issues with intimacy, but how do you think he came to that conclusion? It was like, oh, I was supposed to be like talking about my feelings, and to avoid doing them, I did this.
Just kind of bringing it back again to compare to the pilot episode where we were kind of talking about how he was using rendezvous as a way to connect and like a point of connection. Interesting to compare, contrast to this point where he was actively falling back on that to avoid, again, not a romantic connection, but like a emotional vulnerability, which which we know he's kind of seeking out. So to kind of he's falling back on that because that's, I guess, what he does, but he's also like using that as a crutch or a cop out in a like,
it's a comfort zone where he, he can put that facade on, to not look at what's underneath.
Yeah, we can see then how it's like how he uses it to be helpful for him in the pilot when he was yearning and searching for connection. But we can also see the inverse of that, where he's using these same kind of actions to be harmful instead of hurtful. And maybe that's also because he thinks he deserves punishment again, why he went to the funeral. Anyways, it just becomes a whole.
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole. Yeah.
Complicated gray issue of headspace and with everything else. So,
and then I have from the Association of Directors of Psychology Training Clinics newsletter by Dr. Kim Fuller. In considering how and when to touch a client, it is helpful to examine the question in light of the broad general principles that organize the APA. The principles of basically what benefits and what doesn't benefit reminds them to do no harm to clients, what you just said, and to choose interventions most likely to benefit them. Because touch is deeply emotional, it can trigger powerful negative as well as positive feelings in clients. Touch should never be used unless the therapist knows the client well and is certain that touch is in the client's interest. Hunter and Strube ask, who is likely to benefit from this? In all cases, the answer must be the client. If touch is being considered for the therapist's needs rather than for the client's needs, then it should not be used. These authors caution that clients should consent to touch before it is used. Consent can be written or verbal, and verbal consent can be obtained by simply asking a client, is it okay with you if I touch your hand? Or can I hug you? Can I, that's how you would get consent to even just put a hand on a knee in that situation.
And absolutely not in like the first session.
No.
Right.
So it's interesting then, like, even though not disregarding, but like moving past the, it's the first session. So that's already like an icky area. That is also, we don't know the motivations behind that until Buck does that kind of like 180 and asks her about, did she friend him on Facebook? So then that makes us privy to her motivation. So in that aspect, it really does sound like it was not for the client for Buck's benefit, but for hers, because she already had expressed a specific interest. Yeah. So that's super.
And the kicker for me was just what happened with, like, when they were done and how she freaked out and was like, I can't believe I did that. You need to go. Doesn't apologize to him. Doesn't do anything that didn't make it more icky. And I just felt like that was just 100 pounds of salt in the wound because of how we see Buck in the first episode already.
Yes.
With, trying to find connection and making himself a little vulnerable to ask to see people again and getting rejected. And then the person who was supposed to be professionally taking care of his mental health
doing the same thing as what?
Doing the same thing?
67 or whatever. Like,
and not only doing the same thing, but like being, not like blaming him, but she didn't take any ownership for what happened.
No, she did not take any accountability, which...
She was like, I'm your therapist. And he was like, I feel better. And she didn't go like, you need to go see another therapist. You need to... I feel at that point, if you had any ethics, you would have been like, okay, you need to go see another therapist, because like, not that he sees her again, but that he should have therapy because he already needed it when he came there. And now you've done this. Yeah. And instead she's like, get out.
Like, he shouldn't even have been able to get in the door. She should have refused to see him in the first place.
There are other trauma counselors.
So she all immediately like put herself in that kind of position
to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish I could phone a friend in because I have a friend. We started watching the show together. I think we got up to season 3 together, but she's kind of like a therapist in training. You know, she's getting all her licenses and all of that. And she immediately picked up on that was a big no-no. Absolutely not. Actually, she kind of had a lot to say. I wish I could remember. So like I said, I wish I could phone a friend, but she was not happy with what she saw on the screen. Immediately was like, that she should not have done that. That is the worst possible thing that you could do.
Yeah, and I'm not mad that it was a storyline at all. I just feel like the gravity of how wrong that was maybe should have been addressed at some point. Because I don't feel like maybe the average viewer found anything wrong with it. Was just like, oh, it's just Buck being Buck. It's just Buck sleeping around.
And also, you have to think about it like in the sense of I don't know how, like, I'm not trying to be graphic in here, but like, I mean, look, that's my sexy therapist. I can sleep with her. Like, people, the average viewer could potentially connect it to
like
that
projection, sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, I also kind of wonder then, if like it's kind of not that it's really like played off.
It's not,
but it kind of makes me feel like that scene in particular is like written and or filmed through Buck's point of view situation, in which case he would not have the maybe like his understanding that it was
exactly
so wrong would be like so further down.
Or in hindsight, like we talked about, earlier.
Yeah, so if I guess I feel like I have to take that scene as coming from his POV specifically.
Yeah.
Because I don't think he has the tools to be able to begin to understand like how egregious that action upon him was. So the fact that he kind of like, oh, I feel better, with that like kind of mask facade, like armor sort of thing. I feel like that's kind of how he had to process it.
I just wish it had been addressed at any point again. You know what I mean? Just like if he had even brought it up in conversation and someone was like, that's not.
But I don't think he would have ever brought it up because I think he did realize like that's not good. And I guess also you could see that scene as the plot device for him really coming to like understand that he does have intimacy issues with stuff like that, which is why he brings it up to Abby, and that is the reason why they don't meet or go out. So it's kind in that sense, it's like it kind of like undermines the importance and the gravity of it, but it kind of feels like it's also used in that way a little bit as like a kind of light bulb moment for him. But like there's also so many probably better ways that he could have recognized and realized this.
Yeah, I mean there are other ways that they could have done it, and not that this is a bad way. It's just like, again, like I said, and I won't repeat myself again. I just felt like if that was going to be the way that they did it, which is, something that I'm sure happens, I just felt like it should have been addressed again at some point then, if that was, the reason that they did it. The last two things I have are just some California code stuff about what happens or what can happen to you if you are the therapist in a situation like this. These are 2023 California codes are the most recent ones. I don't know if I need to read Division 2, Chapter 1, Article 10.5, Unprofessional Conduct, Section 726. This is real shit, guys. I did a lot of research.
That's how you know it's official.
I know. So it says, the commission of any act of sexual abuse, misconduct, or relations with a patient, client, or customer constitutes unprofessional conduct and grounds for disciplinary action for any person licensed under this division, under any initiative act referred to in this division. And then section 728 says any psychotherapist or employer of a psychotherapist who becomes aware through a client that the client had alleged sexual intercourse or alleged sexual behavior or so forth during prior treatment shall provide to the client a brochure developed pursuant of the thing that I just read. But since I read it, I thought it was relevant at some point for him when he goes back to therapy, that if he ever brought this up, that by law, that therapist would then have to let them know that it was, I don't want to say illegal, but he can take legal action against her. They are supposed to provide paperwork and make them aware of the action that they're allowed to take, and then say, we highly suggest that you have therapy about this abuse that happened to you. I didn't get into the research of what the actual legal ramifications could be, just that there are some that the client
is protected
or the patient, can take legal action. So just yucky behavior from that therapist, and really sad that Buck had to go through that. That's all I have to say.
I mean, that was an interesting being able to look at it through real world
ramifications,
right.
Consequences.
Yeah.
And it's super informative, especially for people who might have gone through this and didn't know. So, yeah.
It's important.
This episode was a lot. This episode had a lot of themes in it that if you're someone who has been through them or through multiple of them, it's very hard to watch. I think I mentioned before we got on here to actually record that since I started in season 2, I didn't watch this episode until I think I was mid-season 6. But I think if I had started in season 1, that I might not have been able to go forward after this episode, just because of how hard it was for me to watch it.
Totally understandable. And there are a lot of very heavy themes in this episode, but it is kind of just from a storytelling standpoint, it's interesting how they kind of split it up and dispersed it throughout the episode, because you do have a little bit of levity here and there.
Yeah,
and that's mostly coming from Abby and her interactions with Carla, how that kind of breaks up a lot of the emotional heaviness, and how even, and I don't want to say it's played off laughs and giggles or anything like that, but kind of during some of the calls too, after the roller coaster one, but the window washer, the setup for that with the 2 girls in the law office. It's different tonally than what happens, especially the end with the balcony jumper, and how he's threatening this very serious thing, but the way that he's talking back to his wife or his girlfriend, and she's talking back at him, I don't want to say played off for laughs, because it's a serious thing, and they take it as firefighters, they have to take it seriously, and they do.
Yeah, they take it seriously.
But just I think the dynamic was between those two characters added a sense of, again, I don't really want to say levity in this situation, but a tone. So it kind of, so again, even though these are very, very heavy subjects and topics in this episode, I think it's purposely spaced out a little bit. And the other aspects are interspersed. So just something, and I guess that's why would make it easier to digest.
Yeah, I mean, it probably didn't help that I had to watch it 8 times in preparation for this episode.
Yeah, that would really hammer home some of those. Those.
Yeah, but when Syl and I did our first rewatch of it, I was like, "Damn, this is second episode."
Yeah, it really kind of lulls you into a false sense of security, and it's boom, here's all of this stuff right out of the gate, which kind of goes to show that you can never really know what to expect with the show.
No, you can't. No, that never changes,
which is kind of part of the genius.
Kind of just gets crazier and crazier.
But in talking about how this episode was put together, I think we all kind of picked out a couple themes that were pretty prominent during this episode, and I'm sure we're all going to speak to the main one. The title is called Letting Go. So that is, again, one of the things with 911 is the titles are often very telling of the
Yes.
main like thesis of the episode.
Yeah, I was just going to say a thesis statement.
Yeah, sometimes a little more outright than others, like in this
funny
case.
ha-has.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting discussion that can be had about, how like what is being let go of in this episode or how things are being let go.
So I kind of have, because I was like, I can't just do letting go. Because like,
Oh yeah, I have a couple
obvious
others too, but just to start with this.
That's pretty much all I have, but I put the dichotomy of control and holding on versus letting go, because there are moments in the episode for everyone where the focus characters where they're holding on and when they're letting go. So I've got the roller coaster, he literally lets go. The burglary with the Dobermans, he entered the home assuming he was in control so he could commit his crime quietly, and then lost it.
Oh, that's a good
when he was confronted with those dogs.
That's a good.
And then he decided to let go of any remaining control in favor of not getting eaten by the Dobermans when he called 911. The window washer lost control of his safety gear, and the jumper. I put a couple that is clearly hanging onto an unhealthy relationship when they should be letting go.
No, that's 100%.
That's so funny.
Like sometimes you should let go.
Yeah, sometimes
you don't have to hold
just
on.
let go.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
and sometimes you really should hold on, but other times like you don't need to be holding on to this thing.
Yeah, like physically.
You're literally like, I hope you do jump. Just jump. Like maybe couples therapy isn't the option. Maybe just like break up probably be how I would go. Then I have Abby takes control by calling Buck twice and by doing something for herself.
Ooh, nice. That's a nice way to put that.
Yep. And then she lets go of her control, or she lets go of her responsibility. And then I have Buck learns that he cannot hold on to losses, and he learns Athena is really going with this. She's like she's done it several times. She's trying to let go. And then she has to hold on a little bit. I think we talked about this when we were talking about her journey through the episode, how she tries to let go, but then she's like, well, I'm going to hold on to the rest of this. Okay, I'm going to let go. Oh, now I'm really holding on to the rest of this. And at the beginning of the episode, she like lets go of that responsibility for May to Michael, and then she's holding on at the very end.
Yeah, like in a very physical sense. So how did you interpret letting go?
So I had a different theme because I do have letting go. I just didn't see it in a different way. Look, the overarching theme, like especially for Buck, is trying to let go of this guilt and trauma of losing someone on a call. And then with Athena, she had to let go of the symbolism, like the ring on her finger, like her vows.
Ooh.
So that was one.
That's a good one.
And then proceeds to actually let go of her vows after learning that Michael actually did meet someone. And kind of like how I mentioned during our segment on Athena, she let go of those vows, and she was like, all right, even though it was for to capture the burglar, she was like, all right, I'm gonna call him, play it up. Not to gloss over the therapy sessions, there was the feeling of losing people. So Buck losing, in quotation marks, Devin on the job, and then now Athena, personally losing Michael, like in her marriage. But my other theme that I had was perceptions. So how someone is being perceived from the outside versus how they were feeling on the inside. So, we have Devin, who's literally freaking out, hanging on for his life. And he, like, there's like that crowd building, and they're all out there with their phones and stuff. And he's like, oh my God, everyone's going to see this. And like, he's literally freaking out. And that also comes from like the actual literal beginning of the episode with Chad as well, because they're like, we don't want to be perceived as pussies, right? Because they didn't want to get on, because Devin feels safe. And another example of like perceptions is really like the news story on Buck, right? So through the news anchor, he's being perceived as a hero, but on the inside, he's like, I do not feel like a hero. I lost someone.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the burglar. The burglar was perceived as a victim.
I'm starting to think of him as the Hamburglar. Since we don't know his name.
Oh man, we should have been calling him that the whole time. Darn.
And then the window washer. So it's interesting because like you have these two girls inside the building. They're like,
yeah,
they're feeling like super creeped out because the window washer's doing his job, and like they're wondering, can they see me? He's looking at me. He's staring at me. Like they're perceiving him as someone that is like a peeping Tom, I guess.
like their perceived judgment of him, but also like being perceived by him at the same time.
Meanwhile, the guy can't really defend himself that much either because he's doing his job. So it's just kind of like a weird like outside looking in moment, or outside looking in from the. I had a weird no, and I'm pretty sure that's just jumbled words right there. But something about it's subversion for the outside looking in to from the inside looking out.
I get that.
Probably not
That makes
really
sense.
see them
Like
either.
something about like glass houses and blah blah. Oh darn, I did it.
Take a shot.
You made it so far.
And then there's Abby. At the end of the episode, Buck's perception of Abby. He's trying to figure out who she is behind the phone, but ultimately, what he gets is like safe space, someone to be open with. And then another example would be like Devin's sister Liz. Like during the funeral scene, she had it in her head that her brother was, like she says, like happy to be alive, and that he knew that he was loved. But then, she comes back to talk to Buck, and she not only apologizes, but she reveals that 7 years ago, her brother tried to kill himself. Then he went to therapy. She thought that her brother started to get better, but then he started to isolate himself a few months prior to the incident at the roller coaster. And then she called her brother's friend, Chad, to go out, and she thought that Devin agreeing to go out, she thought that he was getting better. And then my last one was May overdosing. So, like Athena originally thinking that, she's just didn't want to go to school or something was going, like she had a test, but we don't really know what caused May to overdose yet.
In this episode.
Yeah. Those are really good. Like, there's so much about like elements of being watched in this episode because I wrote that down as one of my themes as well. And I think you touched on most of them, honestly, but I also wanted to bring up like not only was Devin nervous about, the girls behind him and Chad, like putting them on social media and whatever, but the crowd that gathered once the roller coaster was stuck and malfunctioned, and there was a shot of them, and they all have like their cell phones, and Devin mentions that he doesn't want to be humiliated publicly on social media, but also like the fact that Bobby had to obscure Chad from the public, like basically kind of like white lie in essence, because that's not something the public should see. That's not something Devin should have seen. So to kind of obscure that a little bit, and then in that sense, like something about social media and like letting go of privacy in that, like being perceived like having no privacy, because a lot of times like going viral is not necessarily your choice. So you have to release that sense of privacy as a moment of your life is like then available for public consumption.
And I guess going back to one of the themes that Han touched upon, it's also losing control, your narrative,
exactly,
your story.
And then one more thing about like being perceived. I think I forget which one of you mentioned about the lingering looks that like Bobby and Athena were sharing. Han, that was you, yeah. During the dinner at the beginning of the episode. But there were also a couple other moments when there was clear like a shot of like one character clearly observing another one. So there was also like when Han you're in the show now. When Hen was kind of like going back and forth, like looking at Athena and the Hamburglar. And kind of just like
why weren't we calling him that the whole time? So upsetting.
And clocking what was going on there, but also like at the end when Abby's gonna go call Buck and ask him out on the date, like Carla and Abby's mom are both kind of like looking really expectantly to like see what the outcome is. So that's like another way of us seeing these characters being perceived by the other characters. So kind of in a similar vein, I think it's like very much related to Han letting go of control, because there were a lot of different ways characters let go physically, emotionally, mentally, blah blah blah. But I thought a lot of them, like in addition to control, could be parsed out by like letting go of pride, which is a similar thing. I feel like a lot of it would be the same kind of supporting evidence about Buck letting go of his pride and confiding feelings in Bobby and Abby, and admitting his issues when he's talking to Abby, because that is something that takes like some like conscious thought, and most people would not pony up to that. And then like Abby also is kind of letting go of her pride because she is able to rely on Carla to help her out with her mom, even though, like we said earlier, she likes that sense of control. And also kind of letting go of her pride to ask Buck out also, because she takes a little bit of like encouragement from Carla. There's also Athena letting go of her pride in some ways. So like she let go of her pride
for moments.
Yes. And then it comes back again. But like when she offers Buck an olive branch, when she comes over to the fire station to turn over a new leaf, and also in her admitting that she was in denial about Michael and his sexuality. And I think that takes a lot for her to admit, especially out loud. But then there's also the girlfriend of the balcony jumper. She had to let go of her pride when Bobby told her like, hey, you should just apologize for cheating. And she's like, I didn't do it. But then, and she's obviously, even if she did, she's obviously not sorry, but she has to like let go of her pride in order to like help in that rescue. Devin's sister Liz also let go of her pride by coming back to the station and talking to Buck again and apologizing as well for taking out a lot of her anger and grief on Buck. So that takes a little humility to do as well.
Yeah, that took a lot.
So it was very similar in the same vein of like control, pride, but just like the amount of diversity that they were able to get in how and what things were being let go was really interesting. Like it provided a lot of, I guess, scope and perspective.
Yeah.
The other theme that I kind of picked up on was understanding we may not all have the right tools and seeking out someone who does, or extra support that does. And this kind of also ties into letting go of pride, because understanding that you may not be equipped with the right tools, or equipped with tools, or even the right tools or the best tools in any given situation, and being able to know how and to whom you can reach out is also like putting away your pride in a way. I really liked framing this because at the very beginning, when Devin is at the roller coaster, like before he lets go, he says, I can't. And then I think the next scene from that is when we see Abby and her mom has locked herself in the bathroom, and her mom says, I can't, I don't know how to unlock it. So that's like physically not being able to have the tools. And right when Carla comes in and she takes control of the situation, she says right off the bat, her husband is a handyman, right? So her husband has the tools, like the physical tools, but also Carla has the tools to be able to deal with this situation. Like even though Abby hasn't been able to Alzheimer proof her apartment, Carla knows how, and she can turn it on like a dime. Just going back a little bit, also like the first thing we see in the episode is how Bobby said that they came in with the engine at the wrong angle for the roller coaster. So they didn't have the proper tools or the best approach to handle the situation. So they had to like kind of regroup, and they like were leaning on Buck in the meantime because the engine had to like, they left it and then we're going to bring it back around. So I think that was like an interesting way to start. You know, we talked about Carla giving Abby the courage to go out on a limb and contact Buck because Abby wouldn't have had that otherwise. So Carla is also like giving her the tools that Abby needs to be like more assertive in her own life and confident. Yeah. Confidence, the word I was looking for. Abby, when she's talking to Buck, she wants him to know that she empathizes with him and gives him a little slack. Like she said, you know, sometimes you just can't help them. And that's the tool that he was not giving himself. And the whole theme of therapy specifically, because we see both Buck, even though his is a whole other subject, but also like Athena and Michael, like the concept of going to therapy or the concept of confiding in someone like Buck does find himself doing with Bobby and Abby. And also even when Buck asks the rest of the like Chimney and Hen and Bobby and Athena, like how they deal with that, he's recognizing that he does not have the tools to deal with this situation. So he's kind of outsourcing, right? Yeah. Seeing what other tools he can try on in his tool belt, to go with that metaphor. And then he's also, we mentioned earlier, like he, at the end when he comes to terms with the fact that some people can't be saved and he's passing that on to Liz, he's then taking a tool that he's found works for him in his tool belt and letting Liz borrow it so she can kind of get a grip of that tool, because she was obviously coming back to him because she didn't have the tools, the proper tools, when she first interacted with him at the funeral. So I thought that was like an interesting metaphor of, you know, like confiding in others, seeking out support, and being able to have the recognition when you don't have everything, again, in your tool belt.
The slow burn segment is brought to you by the exact same thing that we said in the first episode, basically. Just copy paste it into a different situation. As we mentioned earlier, how we see Buck progressing, the way he's thinking and the way he's approaching, like not pursuing people. And we talked about how in the first episode that was like his kind of, this is what the bravado of like, this is what men do. You know what I mean? Men do manly man things, and men pursue women, and like the perception of like being a womanizer is basically like the most manly you can be, and then also him desperately seeking kind of connection, but in a low-key way and not being able to find it where he was looking for it in you know, his sexual partners. So we see a little shift in that, but then we see him regress back into it the moment that he feels in this new direction of thinking and expressing himself and trying to make connections. So he reverts back to this little mask, this little performative side of him that we talked about in the first episode, how in bisexuality, especially for bisexual men, they are often like coded in fiction as being promiscuous and doing the womanizing thing and doing things kind of performatively until they kind of are in touch with what they're overcorrecting for. You know what I mean? Where it's like, if they are aware or aren't aware, like it's some sort of subconscious thing possibly, that they're like overcorrecting.
Yeah, like having the pendulum swing all the way back the other way, unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And I think that's something important.
That's my red string. It's not really red string. It's just, you know, it's the first season and it's the only second episode. Yeah, it's kind of the same as the first, but what are you gonna do?
I mean, these two episodes like together are very much like, I feel like they go in tandem. Like even though it's the pilot and this is the second, it seems very linked.
Yeah, but especially for his character arc, it's very much seems kind of like a direct two-part where it's like, okay, here is the origin, and then feels like, I can't actually remember episode's plot right now, but it very much feels like the middle act of something. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
In that part of the journey, I guess.
Like we're starting to see too how these episodes will link to each other and how, you know, the storyline of one episode will happen in the next episode. So it's nice to see how it's starting to build that everything is connecting to each other as opposed to like more of a anthology where it's kind of like more case of the week, and some of the other stuff is a little more like, I guess, kind of like an island in its own.
Yeah.
But these are very closely tied together, and we'll see that continue like as we go on.
As we move forward. Yeah. I was just going to say, we did say it was a slow burn, so stay tuned.
We're here for the long run. But I think that kind of does it for this rewatch of the second episode, Let Go.
We're going to let go of Let Go.
We are. We're
finally.
We're ready.
I'm ready to let go.
Ready to let it go.
So please.
And move on. We've processed it. We're moving on. Remember, don't attempt the maneuver.
But if you do,
take a buddy with you.
Thank you for listening to the Buddie System podcast from start to finish.
We literally cannot shut up about 911, so please come talk to us on your favorite social media platform.
We're at Buddie System Pod everywhere. That's BUDDIE System Pod.
Leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get a personal shout out in the next episode. The Buddie System is a Nerdvergent media production featuring music from Divinity.
Can't get enough of the buddies? Subscribe to our Patreon for access to exclusive content in our Discord community.
Catch you next time, and don't forget,
bring a buddy with you.